Hi, let's talk about the steps of glycolysis. Each one of the steps in glycolysis is carried out by an enzyme. So when I drew the box before and said glycolysis, this is what was happening. Now, there are 5 steps to glycolysis, and we start with glucose, which I'm representing with these 6 blue circles. Each blue circle represents a carbon atom. So glucose, which is transported into the cell, once it's transported into the cell, becomes glucose with a phosphate attached. And this step is called phosphorylation. Now, where does that phosphate come from? It comes from a molecule of ATP. ATP comes in, drops off its phosphate, which gets attached to the glucose, and becomes ADP. So we actually used energy in order to make energy in this step. Now, this glucose 6-phosphate, which gets its name because the phosphate is on the 6th carbon, this glucose 6-phosphate then has the same thing happen to the other side. So we use a molecule of ATP to add another phosphate to the glucose molecule. So now it's symmetrical, and this is called priming. This glucose molecule with the phosphates on either end is now split in half. So now we have 2 3-carbon molecules. Each one has a phosphate on the end. This is called cleavage. Cleavage means to separate or to break in half. Now, each of these 3-carbon molecules now gets a phosphate added to either end in a process called oxidation. For reasons that I'm not going to explain, this does not require molecules of ATP, but it does produce 2 symmetrical 3-carbon molecules. Now, these 2 3-carbon molecules get the phosphates stripped off, so now they're just plain 3-carbon molecules. And in the process, each one of these phosphates is added to a molecule of ADP to form ATP. This is called dephosphorylation because the phosphate groups are being removed from the 3-carbon molecules. And what's left, once the phosphates are removed, is called pyruvic acid. So we start with glucose, we add a phosphate, we add another phosphate, we split that molecule in half, we add phosphates to either end, and then we take them off. In the process, we have spent 2 ATP molecules, and we have formed 4 ATP molecules, giving us a net of 2 ATP molecules. It's not a whole lot, but it is an essential first step in the process of forming ATP.